Hey, Rob, what's going on? Okay, so we are officially recording, and this is the using Qri Call for December. I see the 10, and I think October 7th. And this is the first one which we've made sort of an effort to include folks who've signed up to be beta users. And so I think we've got Emily, Joel, and Rob, who is a friend of the project, is officially a beta user as well. So yeah, if Brendan can take notes, thank you for volunteering. So I think what we wanted to start off with is I can sort of explain a little bit about the goals of where we are in this sort of beta program thing, introduce the Qri members of the team, and then I'd love to get a sentence or two from everybody else in the call about why you agreed to sign up to beta test Qri and what you're hoping Qri does for you. We have a pretty clear sense of what we want to make and how we think it will be useful, but we're going to be turning around and bringing that out to the user base of people who really care about dataset versioning and everything that comes with it. And so we want our next phases of work to be guided by the advice and feedback and problems and issues that you all have. So this will be a really cool opportunity for your opinion to weigh very heavily on the work that we do in the coming weeks and months and years. So you know, Qri's been live for a couple years now on paper, and as an app has been in various forms, but we just recently released Qri Desktop 0.10, and that's the version that we're sort of pushing out to the world to gather as much organized feedback on. I apologize for this train that's probably ruining some of my volume, but anyway, so that's kind of the state that we're in, is trying to learn as much about how desktop works or should work in connection with Qri Cloud, which is a place where we're hoping to publish all of these data sets to in the network. So we can talk all about how those things interact with each other and what they mean, but I'd love to sort of, let's get an intro from each of the other Qri team members, and then I have no idea what starting point you guys are all starting at, Emily, Joel, and Rob, in terms of your familiarity with the project, but that'll help us guide the next sort of things we talk about, so we don't make sure we go too technical or too insider baseball or use acronyms and things like that aren't helpful. So Brendan, you want to start, and then I'll just call on the rest of the Qri team members.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Brendan. I'm the caretaker at Qri, and I work on a bunch of sides of it. Yeah, super happy to be here today, and very excited to hear everyone's input.
All right, Chris, how about you?
Sorry, hey, I'm Chris Wong. I guess official title is Outreach Engineer. Been playing sort of front-end dev and product manager for the last 3 months here at Qri. Just big push behind getting Qri Desktop out. Now focusing on Qri Cloud, the service, and we'll be doing a lot of sort of demos and outreach sort of stuff once we have, well, now that we have our products kind of in a more solid state. So nice to meet you all.
Dustin.
Hi, I'm Dustin. I'm an engineer working on Qri, primarily backend, performance, things like that. And yeah, excited to chat.
Thank you. Casey.
Hi, my name is Casey. I'm also an engineer here at Qri. Last couple months have been mostly working with Chris on desktop and continuing to make improvements. So yeah, really excited that you guys are on this call. I'm excited to hear everyone's feedback. Okay.
And I didn't really give an intro for myself, but I'm Rico, and I kind of run business development, which to date has meant anything that's not engineering is something that I weigh in on, at least. And so in addition to calls like this, where we're hoping to get your feedback and hear your complaints and let you tell us what you want us to build next, I hope you'll also consider me a personal avenue for sharing specific feedback that you just want to send emails to or drop little notes to in our chat on Discord. So I want to make sure that you know that I'm making myself available for that. Okay, how about Emily? Do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm a graduate of a data science bootcamp, and I'm still looking for a job right now, but for now I'm just I'm always on the lookout for cool and interesting open data to play around with. So that's mainly what I'm interested in. I don't know that much about the projects, so that's why I'm here.
Perfect. And how about Joel? You want to go next?
Sorry, let me turn on the camera quickly. I'm in the car, so apologize. So I'm Joel Natividad. I've been working in the open data space for about a decade now. I've had a lot of adventures in this space. So I'm right now I'm with the token. Basically, we're the caretaker of one of the co-caretakers of the CCAN project, and I'm interested in how maybe I can use Qri in trying to move forward the next generation of open data.
Wonderful. That's perfect. And Rob, I believe you are going to round us out.
Hey, I'm Rob. I'm a software engineer, and I've been doing a lot of work lately with a nonprofit called Edgy. That's actually a partner with Qri, working on how we can provide better, more reliable, more equitable access to public data. So like the aspect of Qri that's super interesting to us is that it's distributed.
Cool. All right. Thank you, guys. So in terms of like leading questions that I'm hoping will spark a little bit of discussion, how, among those who aren't on the Qri team, how many of you have successfully or at least tried to download Qri Desktop, the desktop app? You have, Emily. Okay, cool.
I haven't yet. Yep.
Haven't yet. Okay, cool. And how many of you are working on Macs versus PCs versus command line or some other OS?
Yeah, I mainly work on a Mac, but I have I use Linux, Ubuntu all the time, VM,
Okay.
and another machine.
And Emily, it looked like you were about to say the same. Are you on a Mac as well? All right, cool. Sorry, Emily, you said you have tried to download it, right?
Yes, I've downloaded it.
Okay, cool. I don't know if I have any specific leading questions, but do you want to just tell us how your experience was in terms of downloading, getting started, and what you tried to do with it, and whether the support was there for you to get done what you were trying to get done?
I haven't done anything with it yet. Sorry, I just
no problem. What do you want to do with it?
I want to look for I don't know. For now, I just want to explore and see what else is up there and maybe contribute to some data sets. I don't know yet.
Yeah, B5.
Yeah, I think that's like a really interesting jump off point. I think like with Qri, we tried to build this as something that might contribute to sort of fill exactly that need, but I'd be interested to sort of see what anyone on the call sort of feels like they're like, even just speaking more broadly than the project itself, like what you feel like might be missing or could be improved in the data space in your day-to-day work and experience. We've talked a bunch with Rob about like this really gaping hole in like decentralizing data access and that being a crucial part. So Robin, I feel like we've had good input from you on this, but anyone else, like something you're missing from a tool, Emily or Joel?
I can see what I'm looking for. So I've been on a long search for doing version control with data. It's a non-trivial problem. That's for sure. And there were a couple of false starts that I explored down some avenues, like I'm sure you're familiar with the DAT project. And I've been constantly looking for this GitHub of data. As you know, CCAN is more on the metadata. And I think that's a solved problem. It scales well even with traditional databases, but it doesn't, this versioning, especially not just on a blob versioning, but actually, I don't know if we can do.
I think we lost you a little bit there, Joel.
Joel, you still there? So, I mean, Joel is summarizing the problem space of, like, with CCAN, you can upload different versions of the same data set. You can upload new versions as like new files, and then CCAN will kind of help you keep track of them. But like changes to the metadata just happen in the database that is behind CCAN. So you don't really know, when and where the metadata changed. So for those that don't know, Qri is versioning not only the data set itself, but also versioning the metadata and the schema and all the other sort of ancillary things that are not just the data itself that ride along with the Qri data set. So that's a fun aspect of this that means you can actually see, when where little things that seem insignificant change, like when a keyword was added or when a description was proofread or something like that. But it's all there and it all sort of rides together, which is, I think, a big differentiator for Qri.
Great, awesome.
So for the Qri team, we had a meeting late last week to demo the work that was done in Sprint S. And afterwards, we'd had a really great discussion about some of the key features we plan to build in the next couple sprints. And the ones that seem to stay routinely near the top of the list of things we want to prioritize are dataset diffing and reintroducing support for transform scripts. Unless my own biases are bringing those back to the top. I can't remember if there's any big components. Sorry, I shouldn't use components. Any big elements of the way we're structuring the next focus of our work that's worth airing to this crowd and getting their feedback on. Yeah, Brent.
I'd totally add a little bit to that, that we've been talking a bunch about the sort of like social side of this, and like trying to figure out how we do collaboration in a meaningful way. That's the big, for us, this has been a big question mark shaped box that we're starting to like now finally poke holes in with a couple of technical primitives. Just to sort of like catch up a little bit, we've been talking a little bit about the basis of that being something we covered on last using Qri Call, which was talking a lot about this notion of being able to sort of follow a data set along, and as it grows, just automatically grab new versions of it, keeping that in a read-only context. So that's been planned and put in the pipe, but we definitely have a lot of questions around like what it means. Like Emily, you're talking about like just wanting to be able to jump in and collaborate on something, and I think a lot of the expectations we have to start to understand is what does that look like, how does that work, and what do we expect. We often work with different metaphors, but I think it's really interesting. It'd be really important to gather feedback around what the word collaboration means to others and how that could be done properly.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know the last couple weeks since various versions of the like file system linked version of Qri have been floating around. I probably asked a whole bunch of times about transform scripts. But I've also been poking around with, now that that interface is much easier to use, scripting around Qri instead of within Qri, which in some ways I appreciate a lot more. I mean, I've brought this up before in the sense that, I have whatever normal debugging tools I want to use at my disposal, and I can use languages and tools that other people might be more familiar with and are more easily auditable by others. Instead of necessarily needing to use Starlark and use it with whatever libraries Qri provides internally. So I just want to make sure that like my asking about it isn't driving an increased feeling of priority for the transform scripts part. Like they would be great to have back, but also like it's nice that the new structure makes it somewhat easier to script around instead of within Qri. And there's pros and cons to that I've been poking around at.
That sounds like validation for our decision to do file system integration. That's what that sounds like to me. Awesome.
Yeah,
just to provide a little context here, yeah, up until 2 or 3 months ago, Qri didn't really work a lot like Git, and when we say the word file system integration, it's kind of us making Qri work a little more like Git. For anybody who's used Git in the past, it sort of lets you just write to a file in a folder that is has a special link, and Qri knows to say, oh, when you change that file called body.csv, we know that you are probably ready to sort of like update and create a new version from that. On the other side of things, Qri also includes inside of it the capacity to write code that makes datasets self-updating, and so we call those transform scripts. It's definitely a sort of more advanced feature. Like we're sort of positioning it as the sort of second thing you would do after you learn the like basics of being able to create a couple of versions of something. But the reason we've included it is we want the capacity to take 2 data sets and combine them in whatever way that you want. And in order to do that properly, we need a programming syntax. Rico, can you mute? Sorry.
Oh my gosh, sorry.
No worries. That train is so loud. But yeah, and so we want the capacity to be able to say, cool, we want to take 2 data sets and write a script that combines them, and be able to say, all right, take this column and this column, multiply that one by 1,000, and add these together. The reason that we need something like Starlark, which is basically Python. So we can use the reason we have like a Python-like language inside of the box is so that those scripts are aware of the versions, and so that Qri knows when data sets need to be re-updated. To your point, Rob, I'm really glad to hear that FSI and being able to script outside of Qri is coming forward. That was very much our intention. I think it's too the Starlark stuff is boiling the ocean. If we try to like put everything that you would ever want to do with data science inside of Starlark, it's just not going to work very well. But the one thing that you can't do, say, inside of like a Jupyter Notebook or an RStudio package, is you can't write a script that says take these 2 versions of a thing and have that dependency graph sort of stick with it, and have Qri be able to know that you combined 2 different versions of the data set and have that automated update running. So we're really going to, in the coming months, we're going to sort of focus Starlark down and make it really about combining data sets if you need code to combine them. But beyond that, we sort of are hoping that people will bring their own tools and use their own stuff for creating versions wherever they like to. I apologize, Emily and Joel, if this is sounding, feel free to ask any clarifying questions, because that was like 4 projects that are pretty deep in the woods. And so if you have any questions about any of that, we could just take a pause here and answer any questions around those things.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know if, I know there's a big overlap about what Qri is trying to do and what CCAN is doing. And what we've come to really accept is we're just handling metadata. Us trying to be the data store, it's not going to work by pushing data into PostgreSQL.
Yeah, totally.
And now we have a lot of private sector. Yeah, as people, they want to build all these enterprise data inventories with all these schemas, and that's plenty of work enough for us. And I'm just wondering where you see going into, are you going to be the GitHub of tabular data, or what's the vision? And how do you position yourself against projects like the DAT project, and it kind of morphed into something else, and also against data.world and the problem you're trying to solve?
Joel, thank you so much for the question that we're very excited to answer at any given point. Yeah, and so all the projects that you mentioned have at points been inspirational for our project. I think when you say sort of GitHub for data, that gets the closest. I think the original goal was to, I think the CCAN project is incredible, and it was I've met a bunch of folks from the CCAN project, big fans of what's going on there, and just when we did the initial data rescue stuff, we were talking a bunch with the CCAN instance right out of the gates. That's the first thing we spun up, I think. It's been a while, Yeah, as for what Qri is and how it's different from those things is really just trying to solve the problem at a more foundational level. Building a version control system that is aware of data and able to tell you how many rows are in a thing, how many things changed, how many like basic stuff that elevates data as a first-class citizen closer to the way that we think about code. And while we're at it, we should try and solve some of the problems of being able to collaborate. And that means being able to make data set histories that are auditable when somebody needs to dig in and understand how something changed over time. For us, the original sort of reason this project came into existence was like we were trying to build a decentralized archive of a government agency, which is easier said than done. We figured out very quickly that moving bits around is the easy part. You can copy around it. You can copy a data set down. That's great. But like being able to prove that you've copied a data set in a archival way is a very difficult sort of side of things. And even that word proof is kind of subjective. To sort of speak to like, yeah, and so basically what we did is we just said, okay, let's just go drop down to the floor and understand what it would mean to start from the beginning with good primitives to make a data set version control system that would allow a bunch of people to collaborate as they needed, and a bunch of people, and sort of obfuscate away a lot of the sort of things that were articulated, I think, by some great projects. Like the other one that really jumps to mind is the Open Knowledge Foundation's data package, which if you're on Datopian, I'm sure that you're very familiar with data packages. But this idea of reducing data friction really resonated with us. But I think it's, if you have a version control system that's aware of data, it can do the transformations for you. So for example, we keep our metadata in the DCAT spec, which means that we can write one tool that convert any data set to data package metadata, and that should be a single thing, and you should have a thing that just says, cool, make this look like that. And so, and I think you're mentioning of the DAT project sort of like pivot into what's something that looks a lot more like a decentralized web browser, sort of represents where we are kind of working in the other direction, where DAT is a generic file versioning system. Qri is very opinionated and very much about structured data. We can do JSON, CSV, and CBOR, but it has to be structured data under the hood. And so that, for us, that's kind of our guiding light. We are only about versioning and collaborating and joining together structured information, and having that be the basis of our conversation. That's a bit long-winded. Does that help at all? Or any additional detail I can provide?
Yeah, it does. And I mean, it's me. It's on me getting more familiar with the tool and really exploring some possible, ways we can hopefully leverage it. Just FYI, full disclosure. If you go to Datopian.com, we are, apart from maintaining CCAN, Rufus is the principal of Datopian, so he has Data Hub and frictionless data. So we're also maintaining and pushing those things as part of our tooling. And yeah, and if you go to our website, you can also see how we also kind of pivoted to becoming a data management system, rather than just publishing data publishing platform, which we think is a subset of what a data management system would do. But the one big gap that we have right now, among many gaps, is really versioning. And people keep talking about workflow and some other things that we're currently building. So we are also, the CCAN code base is kind of old. It's more than 10 years old. So we're even modernizing it using a more microservices approach, and that Rufus is leading. So yeah, I'm really keenly interested in hopefully that there's a way we can leverage Qri.
Yeah, I should actually mention that I'm fully aware of all of that and very excited. Quite frankly, the ball is in my court to get back to Rufus. We've been talking a little bit about, he sort of like found the project a while ago and asked us about like sort of guiding our spec towards interoperability with the data package format. And I had a number of reasons why we can't divert from sort of the core thing, but we actually have a repo that I'll link as soon as I stop talking, that takes a query data set and converts it to a data package. And so like we have very much, as an open source project, like really the question here is just how can we collaborate both across project formats and otherwise. And so in an ideal world, one day it's like you could just end up using Qri just to like suck stuff out of DAT and put it into a data package format without ever passing into a query format. And if that's all you ever used it for, that's a great thing, I think, for open source. it's, yeah, we're definitely not trying to be the be all end all here, but we would really like, the thing we're really focused on is that versioning problem, and try how can we make a meaningful dent in versioning big data sets. So if you want that problem solved, we are here for you.
Yeah, we'll be pinging every now and then as I get to play around with it. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think just to pivot a little bit, we've been talking a bit about the big question that we have that I think would be fun to ask. You sort of brought up the GitHub for data type thing. And I think that's a fun sort of jump off point for this question of collaborating, just recentering around this, like the thing that we're really excited to build and the thing we really want to build is this like ping pong style collaboration, right? The 5 of us are trying to build some sort of data set that collectively, instead of sort of working in a single silo. That's the thing we're really, for us, that we're really excited about and want to be sort of working on as much as possible. And so, Emily, I hope you don't mind if I put you on the spot, but I'd love to know if you're a GitHub user and if you've ever used GitHub and how you find GitHub as a workflow for code. And so we can maybe use that as a jump off for talking about data collaboration. If you haven't, no big deal. But if you have, ideally we'll center the conversation instead of us diving into metadata sort of syncing schemas.
Yes, I've used GitHub mainly for myself, though not with other teams. But yes, I'm very familiar with that, so you can go ahead and talk about that.
Yeah, I guess the biggest question that I have is like, how did you find the Git and GitHub learning curve when you were sort of picking it up? And feel free to talk at length about any of that experience.
GitHub, well, everything was a bit of a learning curve for me. I don't come from a tech background. I teams says my internet is unstable. Working in teams, that has been a steep curve. Been working with people with things I've done, Haggle, and when you make you can run someone else's kernel, something like that. But I think there are easier ways to do using the GitHub metaphor, kind of be page with everybody using the same data and see what people are doing with it.
So if I understand you correctly, if sort of Kaggle worked more like GitHub, you'd find it easier?
Yes, because on Kaggle, when somebody alters their data, feature engineering, something like that, you can see all their how they've done it. They're not necessarily interested in all that. Get caught up, and if you're working on a same page, like I say, like a combination of Kaggle GitHub would be.
Very cool. Very cool. Sorry, your connection's a little choppy, so hopefully we're getting the thrust of what you're saying. But I think yeah. Yeah, I think that kind of helps. Rico, do you have any other places you wanted to take the discussion? I've totally hijacked this. I apologize.
Not especially. I think Chris has volunteered to give us a sneak peek of Qri Cloud. Brendan, I'll let you veto that if you don't want us to, but I think it'd be fun.
I don't want to veto anything. Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Yeah, there's no secrets here. Okay, yeah, Chris, why don't you give us just a couple minutes view of how we're designing Qri Cloud?
Cool. Let me switch tabs here. And yeah, we just basically, I think, we released Qri Desktop and sort of had Qri Cloud in its like infant stages, which is live right now with some pretty generic layout and design. But Qri Cloud is meant to be the GitHub, the GitHub for our GitHub for data. So Qri itself is the Git, and then Qri Cloud is the GitHub. So just want to show a little bit of where we're going with this. So this is the landing page where you can actually search for data sets. So I can search for earthquakes, for example, and actually land on a sort of list view, or I can click into individual data sets, which I'll click into in a moment here. But you can see where we're going with that. Featured data sets gives us a little space where we can call out attention to popular data sets. So none of our data sets have starring or following at this point, but that's something we're heavily interested in, so that we basically the cream can rise to the top, and things that are more interesting to people or more heavily shared can be something we can feature. And then we have like a recently published list down here. So whenever new open data sets are appearing on the Qri desktop, which we hope is happening 1,000 times a day, you can sort of see what kind of stuff people are publishing and working on, maybe find people to collaborate with. So for example, if I click on one of these, there's a bunch of dummy data sets up here right now, but let's maybe look at this IRS 990 filings. So here's what our, the layout's mostly the same, but we have some better styling here, but you can get a data set preview. For this data set, you can read through the metadata, and then we're still in the process of implementing what will happen with this download button. I think believe we're leaning to at this point, basically like similar to GitHub, there will be sort of a pop down here that just says copy and paste this data set reference. So either as a command line thing, so you can add it to your local Qri data sets, or open it in desktop. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. But just to give another sort of sneak into the social settings, if I click on profile, this is now, you notice the URL up here, it says /Chris Wong. So you can think of this as like the same as your list of GitHub repositories. So now this is where I can show off my data sets of interest that I'm maintaining in the Qri ecosystem. So like, again, you'd probably be able to rank these by what's starred or what has had the most traffic or commit activity lately. But this now becomes sort of my home on the internet for data sets. And if you can take that a step further, I guess Joel, you'd be extra interested in this. This is effectively a much simpler route to publishing data sets, because the data set does actually go to the cloud and is published, but this list by itself is of extremely high value. I don't have to, I can download Qri Desktop, and within a minute, turn my CSV that was a file on my computer into a published record with metadata and with a download link that effectively anybody can share. So you can imagine with just a little more branding, this page on its own is effectively an open data portal for an organization or for a user. But that's kind of the road we're going down. So I just want to share that. And I think that's mostly it for now. But Qri Cloud this stuff will be deployed like probably later this week, and you'll be able to start playing around with it.
Cool. Any first impressions among the folks who haven't seen that yet?
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I'm interested. I asked earlier about data.world, how you will differentiate yourself or compare yourselves to data.world.
Do you want me to take that?
Sure.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing would be the thing under the hood is that's a decentralized network. And so it's a distributed system under the hood. One of the biggest problems that we think we run into when we do this data stuff is like, sure, you can publish to Qri Cloud, but under the hood, we talk about Qri Cloud as just a remote. It's a place that can receive content address data sets. And I think there's like, we sort of experienced a lot of this sort of firsthand, where data.world is a lovely tool. I mean, and you're getting a Sparkle database, right? Like you're actually talking to a SparkQL database under the hood, and that's really neat. But I think that ultimately you run into some questions about like, how does that get sustainable, right? How do we truly get people being able to collaborate across data sets? And like right now, the maximum size of a data set you can upload to data.world without paying for it, I think is 500 megabytes, which is pretty big. I mean, it's great. But there's this question of like, who is the authoritative source of that information? And I think that's, this sounds a little bit technical, but to us, it's actually quite vital that, if Rico works on a data set, that it's attributed to him. And if someone else grabs that data set, that attribution trail follows naturally. And we've had this in software forever, right? It's been possible to build on somebody else's software and like look through now even when you download an npm package in the JavaScript world, it's just going to show you, hey, you've grabbed 200 packages from 150 contributors. And I think that's like a very important underpinning for the people who are actually working on the data itself. And so when you push to data.world, you're pushing to a centralized sort of system, which is not a slight on data.world. It's just a structural problem with the way that we sort of are working with data these days. I think we've sort of putting all this under the arc of centralization pains, and where a centralization pain is just like, if data.world goes down, your data's gone. How do I compute on data in data.world? Do I have to pay data.world for that, or can I pull it down and run it again and know that it's actually sort of the same thing? How can I host a backup of stuff on data.world locally in someone else's machine, and et cetera, et cetera. If you have Git, and you've worked with Git, no, most of us don't do it. Most of us use GitHub, but I like to think about how easy it was to move to GitLab. It was really straightforward to take your entire version history and move it over to a completely different service if you weren't into GitHub and you wanted to switch to GitLab for whatever reason. And I think that is because at the foundation of our software version control is we have this sort of built-in who did what and when, and the actual person's computer is the authoritative source of that information. And so at Qri, we worked really hard to push the attribution to the edges, and not just have that stored as metadata, but actually have that stored as part of the versioning system itself. And I don't think data.world sort of operates that way. I think you get a lot of really nice things out of data.world where you can sort of do the really cool stuff of punch an Excel spreadsheet in and run SQL queries against it. I think that's really gorgeous stuff. But I think that ultimately, if we're thinking about the sort of long-term trajectory and health of an open data sort of ecosystem, I think it's really important to sort of confront some of these questions early about what we're actually all doing when it comes to collaborating.
Great, thank you. That was yeah. I also agree with the whole centralization and forcing. Well, data.world, at least they're doing it in a graph database. We're shoehorning this big blobs of tabular data into PostgreSQL. It just won't scale.
Yeah, and to me, the big concern is who pays that bill, right? Ultimately, is it us? With Qri, we can stay free and really mean it. Right now, if you try to push a data set that's too big to Qri.cloud, it's going to say, you can't push this, but you can leave your machine on and other people can get that data. And we're not going to sort of we'll hold a reference, we'll hold them. And now we actually start to look a lot more like the classic CCAN setup where Qri.cloud is just hosting metadata and says, this is the decentralized content address of this data. We currently don't host it, but we can let you get at it and we can tell you where to find it. Actually, we can tell you not where to find it, what you're looking for, and then you have to go find it, to be very specific. But yeah, and to me, that's really, really important. I think if we're going to have a meaningful conversation about improving our relationship to data, then we have to sort of make tools that allow us to do that and really encourage, if you're working in a lab, you should have some local machine that you're pushing to, as well as Qri Cloud, right? And if you want to do large scale computation and you have good hardware locally, you should do it locally and produce the results and send them somewhere else. We shouldn't be foisting cloud bills or cloud service bills on you if you don't want to pay them. And that to me is really important.
So one of the other great things about Chris demoing what Qri Cloud will look like in short order is it gives us an opportunity to talk explicitly about some of the flows that we've been building for internally, at least in the first version of Qri Desktop. So Emily, now that you've downloaded it, we sort of imagine a couple flows that a first-time user would expect to do. And so I can outline those now for you, but as you're playing with the app, you can let us know how good of an experience that is, or how different the first actions you'd want to take in a data set might be. But one story might be you go to Qri.cloud and you pull that URL or QRL, Query Resource Locator, from Chris Wong's page and go back to Qri Desktop, and there'll be an add dataset feature that will prompt you for that resource locator, in which you just punch that in, and then you can get Chris's data set from Qri Cloud And that's certainly one flow in terms of leveraging open data published by somebody else. The first story that we've kind of put the most energy into is I've got a data set stored locally that I want to publish up to the cloud. And so when you go into Qri Desktop for the first time, you'll have an opportunity to create a data set and then pull one from your file system into Qri Desktop, pick a place that you want that file to be watched by Qri as you edit it in future versions, and then publish that up to the cloud for others to discover. So that sending the data up and pulling the data down are two things we've built for so far, and we'd love any feedback you have on how fun that was, how hard that was, how intuitive that was, whether the tooltips were helpful, whether the tutorials that we make and have made were helpful, and anything. But yeah, no need to put you on the spot now since you haven't checked it out, but those are two sort of user stories that we kind of built for at the very early going. And that goes for everybody who hasn't used it yet. Cool. Anything else we thought would be fun for some of the new folks to either have a look at or learn before they get started?
We could just leave it for questions. Yeah.
Yeah, questions.
Yeah. I mean, is there like a classic go-to example that you have to show the features of, you know, in a storytelling way? Query in action, like with a specific data set, you know, imagining some scenario. Is there something like that you have in your getting started that I can help not only for me to learn, but also to help evangelize what is like why you want this thing that you never thought you needed?
Oh, that's great. Casey, Chris, and I, and Rico, and a few others are hoping to put out a screencast sometime in the near future that would talk through exactly that. Do we have something to that effect right now? Not really. Is that fair? Does anything jump to mind?
So first of all, I would, Joel, I pasted a link into this very rudimentary getting started guide, but it's really more to provide starting from nothing. Here are the 6 steps that would take you from a CSV on your desktop to published data set with some with built out metadata that's on Qri Cloud. So I think that's the ideal starting point, is that if you follow those 6 steps with any data set that you have, and you don't mind pushing something up to be public for experimentation purposes, that'll probably get you through enough clicks and enough scrolls to get a little bit familiar with what's going on in the app. So I'd recommend starting with that, and then I'd also just offer that I'm happy to do a private tutorial with you or anyone else in your org if you just want to take 30 minutes and do that. And then you can ask questions as you're going. Same applies to Emily or anyone else who wants to do it. So just let us know. But I would start there for now. But yes, videos are coming, blog posts are coming in short order.
Great, thank you. It's just that the reason I mentioned that, I remember, when Git was introduced, they were doing it to do Linux, and this is why we should abandon CBS or Subversion. It became very like in your face that why you want this. So it's like a concrete example of the new technology in action. So yeah.
I don't know. I mean, would you say there's an equivalent tech right now that is mainstream enough that we need to, say this is the alternative to that? Because to me, it's like now it's, the alternative. There's no. I don't know. I guess there's no one thing that's mainstream enough that we're saying this is an alternative to. We're just saying this is an alternative to the collection of frustrations that come from, trying to work on a data set together with people, whether it's like storing it in GitHub and using GitHub for data, or if it is, emailing things back and forth to each other. So those are all things I would outline as we're a solution to that, but there's no one thing that everyone needs to switch from,
Yeah, that's true. There's no no dominant solution other than your traditional file system, and just throwing, because of bandwidth is cheap and PCs are hardware is cheap. We just throw everybody copies of data.
Yeah, I think I also just would say, like, data publishing is hard, even though, like, I used to talk all this trash in government and saying, like, putting files on the internet is easy. You do it every day on your phone, when you put Facebook apps online, but like it is still hard. And it's like, if you want a good looking website that lists your data sets, you either need to go pay for a third party service, or stand up your own CCAN server, or do some web development on your own. And all of those aren't things you can do in an afternoon. All of them take a lot of cycles and a lot of thought. So I think that's another angle that we would push on, is like, even if you're not interested in the version control, which is wonderful and can solve a lot of your problems, just the quick route to publishing. Publishing a well-curated, well-designed, easy to navigate list of your data sets is another, good angle that might attract some people.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your feedback, everyone. And so just to clarify, we have these calls every Tuesday at 2. And so if you want to join the call, feel free. But also, as Rico said, if you just want to email any of us or join on any of our GitHub side of things, we do all this in the open. We would Monday at 2. Thank you. Wow, my brain. It's Monday. Every Monday at 2, we alternate developing Qri Call and using Qri Call. So next week is developing, and then the week after that we'll be using. Feel free to join either. But we're really welcome, sort of like even your wild-eyed. Wouldn't it be great if, because that's sort of where we live, and we'd be happy to hear what you want to see out of this stuff. And if you're interested in integrating Qri with something that already exists, or how can Qri do something on that side of things, we're happy to help even in any way. But yeah, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful. We really appreciate you guys giving us an hour of your time to learn a little bit more about what drew you into Qri. And in future calls, just because you're a beta user officially, please feel free to invite others that you think might be interested in topics like this. This is an open call that we tweet about, so we're welcome to have anybody come, people who are building competitor products, or people who want to integrate, or people who want to steal Qri and use it for something specific to themselves. Everybody's welcome. So cool.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. And just so everybody knows, like we said, we've recorded this call and we'll be publishing it to YouTube, so that if you ever need to refer to it or share it with another person, you'll be able to. Chris, do you have one last thing? Or no? Okay, cool. We'll let you guys all go, and see you either next Monday or the following Monday.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again.
See y'all.
Bye.